Why the deep thinker is always alone. A philosophy of the outsider mind. Have you ever felt like your thoughts echo in a room no one else can hear? Like the more deeply you see the world, the more distant you become from it? It's not just you. Throughout history, society has praised innovation, depth, and insight, but rarely does it embrace the minds that produce them. The paradox is striking. The deeper you think, the lonelier you often become. But why? Today, we're diving into this paradox. We'll explore why profound thinkers are often misunderstood, why society resists intellectual depth, and whether solitude is a curse, or perhaps a strange form of liberation. Let's journey together into the mind of the outsider. Chapter 1. The burden of depth. To think deeply is to step outside the flow of conventional life. It is not merely a cognitive act, but a rebellion of perception. Most people swim with the current, not out of ignorance, but necessity. They adapt to norms, accept the givens, follow the scripts handed to them. Not because they lack intellect, but because they crave stability, safety, belonging. To question too much is to risk isolation. To deviate is to be seen as difficult, ungrateful, or even dangerous. And so, the majority find comfort in the familiar rhythm of societal expectations. Work, consume, obey, smile, repeat. They inherit beliefs without interrogation, traditions without context, and goals without introspection. This is not stupidity. It's survival. But the deep thinker cannot stay submerged in that stream. Something in them resists. They drift sideways. They swim upstream. Not to be contrarian, but because their mind won't stop asking. Why are we doing this? Who decided this was normal? Is this truly meaningful? Or simply convenient? Is this structure built on truth or on habit? They don't just prune the leaves. They dig into the soil. They seek to understand the root causes, the hidden assumptions, the unspoken rules. And in that process, they begin to unearth uncomfortable truths. This kind of mental excavation doesn't go unnoticed. It creates tension, even fear. Because when someone begins to question the foundations, the rituals, the hierarchies, the myths that hold civilization together, it threatens the entire structure. And so, society reacts, not always overtly, but subtly, through disapproval, through marginalization, through the quiet rejection that says, "You're too much." The deep thinker is labeled too intense, too serious, too abstract, too impractical. They are told to lighten up, to be more realistic, to stop overthinking. But what if it's not overthinking? What if it's just honest thinking in a world addicted to denial? What if those labeled too much are actually seeing too clearly? Because to think deeply is to pierce the illusion. It is to notice the contradiction in our values, the emptiness behind our pursuits, the hollowness beneath our success. It is not an act of arrogance. It is an act of attention. And in a society that rewards performance over authenticity, that kind of attention becomes dangerous. Not because it is wrong, but because it reveals what others would rather keep hidden. Chapter 2. Language as a barrier. Communication is supposed to connect us, to be the invisible thread that binds thought to thought, soul to soul. But for the deep thinker, language can become a wall instead of a bridge. Words, for most, are tools of function, simple exchanges to navigate daily life. How was your day? What's the weather like? Did you see that show last night? These are easy, familiar, and safe. But the deep thinker traffics in complexity. Their insights are not plucked from the surface. They are mined from inner caverns. Ideas shaped by solitude, by relentless questioning, by nights spent wrestling with meaning. Their thoughts are layered, textured, tangled in abstraction. And when it comes time to speak them aloud, something gets lost in translation. The more nuanced the insight, the harder it is to simplify without distortion. Everyday language buckles under the weight of philosophical depth. How do you speak of cosmic insignificance at a dinner party? How do you voice the ache of existential freedom over coffee? You try. You fumble for the right metaphor. You soften your words so they land more gently. You dilute your thoughts just enough to be digestible. And still, you're met with blank stares, polite nods, nervous laughter, or swift changes of topic. It's not that people are being rude. It's not malice. It's mismatch. They simply lack the framework to hold what you're offering. Like trying to explain the elegance of a symphony to someone who's only ever heard a doorbell. It's not that they're incapable. It's that the context is missing. And after a while, this repeated failure to connect leaves a mark. The deep thinker begins to withdraw, not because they believe they're better, but because the energy it takes to constantly shrink your thoughts to make them palatable is exhausting. You begin to question, is it worth saying what I truly mean if no one understands it? Is it better to stay silent than to feel like an alien in your own language? So, you retreat, not into bitterness, but into quiet. You learn to hold your truths close, like delicate glass, shared only with those rare souls who speak your dialect of depth. This isn't arrogance, it's self-preservation. Because every thinker eventually learns a quiet, sobering truth. Depth rarely translates cleanly into words, and even more rarely into ears ready to receive it. Chapter 3. Solitude versus loneliness. Here lies a subtle but vital distinction. Solitude is not loneliness. They may look the same from a distance, one person alone, but their essence couldn't be more different. Solitude is chosen. It is a conscious retreat, a sacred withdrawal from the noise of the world. It's the silence that speaks, the space where the mind stretches and breathes. Untethered from obligation, free from performance, solitude becomes the ground where deep thought takes root. It is not emptiness. It is clarity. It's where ideas are born and reshaped, where memories are sifted for meaning, where questions are allowed to hang unanswered without anxiety. Many of history's most profound minds, Nietzsche, Simone Weil, Kierkegaard, Thoreau, did not just endure solitude, they sought it. They knew that reflection, imagination, and inner transformation rarely bloom in crowded rooms. But loneliness, that is something else entirely. Loneliness is not the absence of people. It is the absence of resonance. It is the hollow feeling that creeps in when you speak, and no one truly hears you. It is the ache of being surrounded yet unseen, of being with others and still feeling like a ghost. It's not about physical separation, it's about spiritual disconnection. And the deep thinker often lives at the intersection of both. They crave solitude, like others crave companionship. Not because they dislike people, but because solitude feeds them. It allows their thoughts to marinate, their questions to unfold, their inner voice to rise above the din. They feel most themselves in quiet places, unburdened by the need to explain. But even the most introspective soul yearns for communion. Not surface-level interaction, but real connection. A kindred mind. Someone who doesn't flinch at the depth. Someone who sees the nuance, the subtlety, the ache beneath the insight. Someone who meets them in the space beyond the obvious. And when that connection never comes, or comes too rarely, the thinker begins to drift. They are full of insight, yet starved of reflection from another. They know themselves deeply, yet feel painfully unseen by the world around them. It is a paradox that defines much of their experience. To be nourished by isolation, but bruised by it too. To be empowered by aloneness and simultaneously wounded by its silence. This duality creates a strange, fragile state of being. It is the condition of one who walks the edge, between fulfillment and yearning, between self-sufficiency and quiet sorrow. They are not broken. They are not lost. They are simply living in the tension between the richness of solitude and the deep human hunger for understanding. And in that tension, something remarkable happens. The thinker learns to live with contradictions. They grow comfortable with ambiguity. They begin to see beauty not just in clarity, but in complexity. Because to think deeply is to feel deeply, and to feel deeply is, inevitably, to carry both solitude and loneliness in the same heart. Chapter 4. Society's Suspicion of the Unconventional. Most societies operate on predictability. They are machines of order, built on habits, reinforced by norms. They rely on rules, routines, and clearly defined roles to keep things moving smoothly. There's a script, and everyone is expected to follow it. From childhood, we're trained to value structure, to embrace consensus, to avoid rocking the boat. Because predictability isn't just efficient, it's safe. It keeps institutions stable, economies functioning, and communities cohesive. In such a system, disruption isn't merely inconvenient, it's perceived as dangerous. Anything or anyone that questions the script threatens the entire performance. The status quo, though often flawed, feels familiar. And familiarity breeds security. So when someone dares to think differently, to challenge the rules, to question the assumptions, to reimagine what's possible, they are rarely embraced with open arms. At best, they are tolerated. At worst, they are ridiculed, silenced, or erased. History is crowded with these misunderstood figures. Visionaries who were dismissed as heretics, lunatics, or dreamers until time proved them right. Galileo, who dared to suggest the earth revolved around the sun, was condemned for threatening the religious order. Socrates, whose relentless questions unsettled the Athenian elite, was sentenced to drink poison for corrupting the youth. Even figures like Van Gogh, who painted with colors no one understood, or Emily Dickinson, who wrote poetry the world wasn't ready for, lived in obscurity, their brilliance unnoticed, until long after they were gone. It's a pattern. The present often punishes what the future will celebrate. Society needs progress. It needs those who question, innovate, and illuminate new paths. But paradoxically, it also resists them, because progress requires disruption, and disruption threatens comfort. This creates a profound contradiction. We idolize revolutionaries in hindsight, but ostracize them in the moment. We put statues in parks for the ones we once exiled. We quote the words of those we once silenced. We turn the wisdom of yesterday's radicals into today's slogans, sanitized, commodified, stripped of their original defiance. And this is the tragic irony of the deep thinker. They often live lives rich with inner insight, but marked by outer isolation. Their minds operate years, sometimes centuries, ahead of their time. They see patterns others overlook. They ask questions others are afraid to ask. And because their vision doesn't fit into the narrow lens of the present, they are dismissed as eccentric, difficult, or out of touch. Their insights are seeds planted in soil not yet fertile. They speak truths the culture hasn't matured enough to hear. And when recognition does come, it is often posthumous. When their presence is no longer disruptive, when their ideas can be safely turned into history, instead of active challenge. This is the burden of the thinker, to carry a torch that others can't yet see the light of, to walk a path with few companions, guided not by approval, but by inner conviction. And yet, despite the pain, despite the solitude, they persist. Not for fame, not for applause, but because the pursuit of truth, insight, and understanding is its own reward. Because some minds are wired not to conform, but to illuminate. So while society may turn its back on the thinker today, it is often their light that shapes tomorrow. Chapter 5. The Deep Thinker's Dilemma. So what's a deep thinker to do? Suppress their thoughts for the sake of belonging? Or embrace solitude and risk alienation? It's a dilemma that isn't just intellectual. It's existential. It touches the core of what it means to be human. The tension between authenticity and acceptance, between inner truth and external validation. It's not an easy choice, because both paths carry a cost. To suppress your thoughts, to dull your inner vision just to fit in, is to betray something sacred within yourself. It leads to a kind of slow, spiritual death. You may show up, participate, laugh at the right cues, and say the right things, but it's performative. You're playing a role in a script written by someone else. The laughter feels hollow. The conversations feel like echoes, and every smile, no matter how polished, hides the ache of unspoken thoughts, unexplored ideas, unrealized depth. You're surrounded by people, but starving for connection. You belong, but only superficially. On the other hand, embracing your full depth, your questions, your wonderings, your complexities, can push you to the edges of social circles. It can make you feel like a shadow in your own life, visible, yet not truly seen. You walk through the world with a lantern few others recognize, illuminating paths they're not interested in walking. And so, you learn to expect silence after you speak. You learn to carry the weight of insight without applause. You learn that loneliness isn't just about being alone. It's about being misunderstood. There's no perfect solution, no simple answer. Because this isn't a problem to be solved, but a reality to be lived through. It's the paradox of the deep thinker. The richer your inner world becomes, the more estranged you may feel from the outer one. But perhaps the key lies not in choosing one extreme over the other, but in finding a balance that honors who you are. Maybe it starts with acceptance, not a passive resignation, not a giving up, but a mature, defiant kind of acceptance. An inner clarity that says, this is who I am. This is how I see. This is the weight I carry. It's not about isolating yourself or trying to force others to understand. It's about no longer apologizing for your depth, no longer shrinking to fit into spaces that were never built for you, no longer mistrusting the very thing that makes you rare. Acceptance allows you to stop fighting yourself. It grants you the peace to walk alone when you must, and the wisdom to recognize the rare soul who does understand. When they finally appear, it lets you choose solitude without bitterness and connection without compromise. Because while the deep thinker may not always find crowds, they can find something deeper: clarity, meaning, and the rare, luminous joy of authenticity. A joy that doesn't depend on popularity. A joy that radiates not from being seen by many, but from seeing yourself clearly, completely, and without shame. And in that self-seeing, the thinker discovers something profound, that the path of depth may be lonely, but it is never empty. Chapter 6. Finding the Kindred. And yet, not all is bleak. Despite the weight of isolation, Despite the aching silence that often surrounds a life of thought, there is a quiet, persistent truth. Kindred spirits do exist. They are rare, yes, like stars scattered across a vast night sky, but they are out there, thinking in hushed tones, feeling deeply behind quiet eyes, wondering about the same mysteries in different corners of the world. They too have wrestled with alienation. They too have questioned the obvious, stared into the void, and dared to speak the thoughts most people ignore. And when, by chance or fate, two deep thinkers find each other, the connection is not just pleasant, it's electric. It's as if the soul exhales after holding its breath for years. You don't have to explain your pauses, your silences, your intensity. You don't have to water down your words or soften your edges. You speak, and they hear you. Not just the words, but the world behind them. Conversations don't stay on the surface. They dive, spiral, unfold. They stretch for hours, into the night, blurring the line between speech and communion. Ideas aren't just exchanged. They build, evolve, resonate like chords in harmony. The connection feels less like discovery and more like recognition. As if you've remembered something you never knew you forgot. Such moments are rare, but they are real. And they matter more than 100 shallow interactions. They are the soul's nourishment, the fuel that sustains the thinker through long stretches of silence and solitude. This is why it's so crucial not to dilute your voice, not to contort yourself into the shape of acceptable. Because the moment you start silencing parts of yourself to be liked, you also silence the very frequency that would attract those who truly see you. It's tempting to compromise, to speak less, to smile more, to conform just enough to feel less alone. But doing so ensures a more painful loneliness, the kind where even in company you remain invisible, where you may be surrounded, but not known. By standing in your truth, even when it isolates you, you become a signal, a kind of quiet beacon, transmitting authenticity into the world. And though it may take time, that signal can be received. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. But eventually, someone out there will catch the wavelength. Someone will hear the quiet hum of your truth and realize it matches their own. And when that happens, the weight, the loneliness, the doubt, all of it will have meant something. Because you will have found what most people never do. Not just a companion, but a mirror. Not just company, but communion. So keep speaking, even when the room goes quiet. Keep writing, even when no one responds. Keep thinking, even when it sets you apart. Because someone, somewhere, is waiting to find you. But they can only find you if you don't lose yourself first. Chapter 7. The Liberation in Being an Outsider. There's a hidden gift in being on the outside. It doesn't feel like a gift at first. At first, it feels like exile, like you've been locked out of something everyone else seems to understand. You watch the world move in rhythm, synchronized and confident, while you linger on the edges, uncertain, questioning, apart. You feel the ache of disconnection, the subtle weight of being different. But in time, something shifts. You realize that this very disconnection is also a kind of freedom. Because when you no longer belong to the crowd, you're no longer bound by its expectations. You're released from the invisible contracts of conformity. You no longer have to wear the mask, perform the part, or shape your thoughts to fit a mold that never fit you in the first place. And that release, though quiet, is powerful. It opens space to think without censorship, to feel without shame, to explore without boundaries. You can entertain dangerous ideas, forbidden questions, unconventional visions. You can construct a worldview that is not inherited, but discovered. One that reflects not tradition or trend, but truth. In that solitude, you begin to build. Not in rebellion, but in authenticity. You become a world unto yourself, not out of pride or arrogance, but out of necessity. Because the world you were handed never quite made sense. So you make your own. This is where the deep thinker begins to transform. What once felt like isolation starts to feel like sovereignty. You are no longer drifting. You are steering. You're no longer waiting for validation. You're listening to your own internal compass. Of course, this liberation doesn't arrive overnight. It unfolds slowly, layer by layer. At first, the silence is loud. The absence of connection can feel like a wound. But with time, that silence becomes space. And in that space, something new emerges. Clarity. And then, creation. Ideas that had been trapped beneath the weight of social expectation now rise to the surface. Creative insights begin to bloom. Your mind becomes a laboratory, a temple, a forge. And what you create from that place is unlike anything produced by the crowd, because it comes from a deeper, less diluted source. And perhaps that's the final paradox. The deep thinker doesn't stand outside because they're broken. They're not misfits because something is wrong with them. They're outside because they've stepped into a truth that runs beneath the surface. A truth that few are willing or ready to face. To stand apart is not to be lost. Sometimes, it's the only way to be found. And while the path of the outsider is steep and lonely at times, it's also rich. Rich with vision, rich with insight, rich with the rare kind of freedom that comes only when you stop asking for permission to be who you are. So if you find yourself on the outside, don't rush to get back in. Pause. Look around. There's something sacred out here. You've been given space, not just to escape, but to become. And in that becoming, you may just discover the one thing the crowd can never offer: yourself. So if you've ever felt alone in your thoughts, take heart. You're not broken. You're not too much. You're not out of place. You are a thinker, a seeker, a mind in motion. And while the path you walk may be solitary, it is also sacred. Stay true to your depth. Stay curious, and know that even in silence, your voice matters. Thanks for watching. If this resonated with you, subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it. See you in the next video.